Welcome back to Business Morning, the Tuesday edition of the program on Channels Television. Well, today we'll be looking at the Nigeria Customs Service and economy with focus on the ports, which we know is one of the avenues where investments come into Nigeria, and of course it leads to improved growth and job creation as well. Well, to discuss more on this, I'm being joined on the program by the President of National Council of Licensed Customs Agents and member of the Presidential Committee on Customs Reforms, Mr. Lucky Amiwero. Thank you so much, Lucky, for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, Lucky, it's, like I just mentioned, one of the channels where investments come into the country from every part of the world, foreign, and even, of course, it affects us domestically as well. Now, looking at reforms that have been ongoing, because reforms have been ongoing to position that sector to enable us tap into the investments that are coming in. Looking at the reforms, would you say that they've really achieved much?
Well, thank you very much. We've got a series of reforms, and like what you said, looking at the reform, they have not achieved much. Reforms actually are made for a change in the pattern of doing business, a change in the way our procedures and process are actually done, a change in our value concept. But in our own reform just have achieved some height, but actually have not been too successful. We have a lot of reforms. We have the port reforms, we have the customs reforms, and we will have the reforms of the economy. But when we look at the port reforms actually is limited. The customs reforms to have its own basis. But I want to pick each of them. The port reforms actually. When you look at the reforms, we are looking at the reforms that have to do with the procedures. Then we look at the reforms that have to do with logistics, that have to do with the port reforms. Port reforms actually coming on the basis of looking at the ports, how to change the way we do things in the aspect of looking at the concession, looking at privatization, looking at corporatization, looking at how do we model our port to be in line with international best practice.
What about the customs reforms?
The customs reforms over the years, we have done the reforms to a point, but it has not yielded the desired result to an extent. There have been reforms there. There have been reforms in terms of technical reforms, trying to introduce tools like the scanners, the platforms, then the procedures in terms of valuation and classification, and try to see how we can upgrade. But we have a lot of setbacks in those two reforms, which I try to analyze. One, on the port reforms, what we have done in the port so far is that we have reformed the port without looking at the tools. When you reform a port and you concession a port, you must look at the process of concessioning and make sure that those tools are there. And when you concession a port, then you need to put in those factors that must be able to protect the interest of all the players in the whole industry. The problem we have now is that you have a concession that does not have an economic regulator. And when you don't have an economic regulator, you have a problem. Because when you concession is a new tool. Concession is not lease. In our law, we have lease, we have corporatization, we have joint venture, and we have private participation in the law. There is the Act 38 of 1999, which is the Port Act. We have all this concept, but unfortunately, you don't have concession. A concession is not just about leasing. Concession is seeding. And concession actually work with 4 elements. You seed traffic, you seed tariff, you seed the workers, and you seed infrastructure. And when you seed this, you look at the 3 port elements. The 3 port elements, you are looking at the regulation, you are looking at landlord, and you are looking at port operation. The port operation was taken over by the concessionaires, which is the cheapest, because you make money every day. The most expensive aspect was given back to government, which is the technical aspect. So the concession itself is not regulated. So you allow this concession to be left in the hands of the people who are running the port.
But if we're trying to reform